Welcome to this public oration by the Right Honorable Patricia Scotland, Secretary General of the Commonwealth. On behalf of ORF, let me welcome you all, and I look forward to both the oration and the interaction with all of you seated here. Now, at ORF, we are very excited by the prospects of the next Head of Government's meeting of the Commonwealth in 2018. We certainly see this particular grouping at ORF as a potential group of countries who can weigh in together to respond to some of the common opportunities and challenges of this time, especially in a world that's gone all crazy. I was just reading up some numbers, and I am told by one particular website that there are 2.2 billion people in the Commonwealth. We have nearly 60% of them under the age of 30. So Commonwealth is not only an organization which has a legacy, but Commonwealth will have to serve the future. Much of its citizenry is going to be engaged with the next 2 decades of human development. 40% of the world's workforce, I am told, is also going to be residing in the Commonwealth in the next few years. So we are also going to be the ones who are going to create value for the world. Some of us are going to, of course, benefit from our insurance and pension investments, but many of us will have to work to make sure that those investments do indeed fructify. 60% of the Commonwealth is likely to be comprised of Indian citizens. So in many ways, at ORF, it is very difficult for us to conceive of an Indian future that does not have a component of the Commonwealth in it. So in many ways, we are also tied at the hips in India when we discuss the potential and the scope of innovation, of working together, of governance, and of responding to common opportunities and challenges. We have this morning a very, very interesting speaker. I've just had the privilege to speak to her on the sidelines of this particular event. And of course, she's a lawyer by training. She's a politician by profession. She's been the Attorney General. She's been a minister in the British government. And of course, she is passionate about sustainability, about gender, about youth, and about what we could do in the Commonwealth together. But before I invite her to speak this morning, let me also invite Mr. Rt Tandon, Joint Secretary with the Ministry of External Affairs, who's shepherding India's engagement with this particular platform, to actually say a few words, to deliver the opening remarks. Mr. Tandon, may I request you, please?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Samir. Thank you for inviting me for this occasion. Thank you for allowing me to be the substitute speaker, because Secretary Ghanshyam could not be here herself. Thank you very much for that too. And a very warm welcome to the Commonwealth Secretary General, who has had, I think, a red-eyed flight overnight. Thank you for being here also, and thank you for accepting our invitation to come to India, especially at this critical time when we are gearing up our preparations for the forthcoming CHOGM in London in 2018. So thank you very much for that. I thought that since I am, after all, a substitute speaker, I will try and give you an overview, a quick overview of how India looks at the Commonwealth, so that this sets the background for your interaction with the Secretary General. Amongst all the multilateral platforms that India is engaged with today, the Commonwealth is a rather unique entity. It's this grouping of a very diverse set of countries, from small island states to advanced industrialized economies, brought together on a common platform for work, bound together by their shared commitment to democracy, rule of law, and justice. So in the multilateral space, as a grouping or a multilateral platform, this is a very unique creature. Over the years, the Commonwealth has also developed a very powerful and credible voice in the international system. particularly when it speaks about issues of the developing country, the international community does listen very carefully. So it does have this very powerful international voice. In addition, over the years, the Commonwealth has developed this remarkable capability to foster intra-Commonwealth cooperation, and sometimes to render assistance directly to countries who call upon the Commonwealth for assistance. So in addition to having this very powerful international voice, it also has this ability to be a force for good, as Commonwealth members like describing this ability to do good for the Commonwealth members. This capacity is, spread out over the Commonwealth Secretariat, the intergovernmental organizations that exist within this platform, and the vast number of accredited organizations which all come together to form this multilateral platform with a strong international voice and a strong capacity to do good for its members. But in addition to all this, there is a feature of the Commonwealth that makes it a truly unique multilateral platform. It has, over the years, consciously developed a procedural culture. All multilateral organizations and platforms evolve over time a procedure to do their work. The Commonwealth has focused or has consciously developed a procedural culture which is based on informality, on decision-making based on consensus, and a very strong, sentiment within the Commonwealth that you have to take into account the opinions and the needs of those who are the most needy. In other words, you cannot leave anyone in the Commonwealth behind. When that comes together, it actually makes for a very unique multilateral platform. And I must say, this is the feature that is particularly attractive to India. Many countries in the Commonwealth find it difficult to engage with large multilateral organizations. They find the procedures intimidating, they find the bureaucracy of these organizations difficult. So the Commonwealth, with this unique capacity of a strong voice, ability to do good, and its informal procedural culture, lends itself very well to a lot of countries who otherwise find multilateral engagement an onerous task. This is a feature that India finds particularly interesting, especially now as our maritime interests expand, as we re-engage with the Indian diaspora who are spread out over the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, the Caribbean, we can see firsthand how important this platform, this multilateral organization is for countries that are of interest to us. That is why we feel that the revitalization of the Commonwealth is such an important thing at this juncture that we find ourselves in the international system. Everyone, as Samir just mentioned, there is multilateralism in general is under stress. I think increasingly people have noted that the international community seems to have lost this ability to work collectively for common good. The rich and powerful seem to want to, ignore international norms and principles. So at this particular conjuncture, the Commonwealth, for most of the Commonwealth members, is a very important multilateral platform to engage with. And for some countries, it is perhaps the most important multilateral platform. This pretty much summarizes, I would say, our view of the Commonwealth, and we, like other members of the Commonwealth, see the forthcoming London summit as a very important stepping stone to a comprehensive revitalization of this important multilateral platform. And this is, I would like to use this occasion to get some views, some insights from the Commonwealth Secretary General, who is here with us today. And I hope we can get some insights on that, Madam. Thank you very much.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Can I say straight away how incredibly pleased I am that I have this opportunity to come and speak to all of you about the Commonwealth, but also to say how pleased I am that so much of my work has now been done for me. This is a very important moment for us, and I think I can certainly emphasize and underline what has just been said in relation to the uniqueness of the Commonwealth family. And I think it's important for us just to underline that, in fact, we are a family. We share so many things in common, not least our humour, and I must never forget cricket. So, ladies and gentlemen and friends of the Commonwealth, it's so important for us to look at what joins us. I think the basis upon which humankind is able to work and plan globally together is very similar to our DNA. 99% of our DNA of every single individual is identical. And that is something we share each with the other. The tragedy of our human history and of most that is negative in our world today stems from the tendency to exaggerate and concentrate on the 0.1% which separates us rather than the 99% which unites us. So understanding how much we hold in common as individuals, as communities, and as nations brings promise and progress through friendship, cooperation, alliances, and partnership. And partnership is really what the Commonwealth is most about, because it enables us to overcome division and, by working together, to transform the possibility of peril to positive potential, and to do it in a way that is collaborative and sensitive and appreciative of difference. And within the rich diversity of humankind globally, the commonality, which is so apparent within the Commonwealth, offers greatly enhanced opportunities for solidarity and teamwork. The Commonwealth's Commission on Respect and Understanding, which was chaired by that great son of India, the Nobel laureate Amartya Sen, added greatly to our understanding of how, by building on what unites us, we overcome what divides us or tends to lead to conflict. And in the report on that commission entitled Civil Paths to Peace, Professor Sen advocates solutions to conflict based on multiple identities we each have as individuals, finding in them the foundations for understanding and mutual respect of others, rather than dwelling on difference and division. And allow me, if I may, just to read a passage from the executive summary of that report. The shared history and traditions of Commonwealth members has yielded administrative, educational, and legal lessons that provide fertile ground for the exchange of ideas and best practice. The Commonwealth has used these to good effect, particularly in its support for the poorest and the most marginalised, women, young people, indigenous groups, and the rural poor, particularly those in least developed countries, including those in small island states. And that really is a powerful and persuasive expression of not only what you've just heard this morning, earlier, but why we should cherish the Commonwealth as precious yet practical grouping within which to pioneer progress towards peace and prosperity. As a family of nations which has grown and developed organically rather than as a political blueprint. The Commonwealth is adept and particularly well suited to responding to emerging challenges and working together to make the most of new opportunities. We are now a family of 52 independent and equal sovereign nations, set in every continent and ocean. We may soon be 53, and more countries are hoping to join. There are large and small countries, some with advanced and some with developing economies. Populations range from the very large to the very small. And here in India, as you've just heard, you have more than 1.3 billion people, while Tuvalu and Nauru, who are island states in the Pacific, have populations of around 11 or 13,000. And the country of my birth, Dominica, we are a mighty 70,000. So 30 of our members are small states. Many of them are island nations. And as you've heard, many of them without the Commonwealth would have a very small voice, which would be hard to hear. And 2.4 billion people live in the Commonwealth, which, as we've heard, is a third of the world's population. And we come together as the modern Commonwealth, not because of shared geography, nor economic parity, or other similarity or mutual interest. Unusually, we are united by our joint commitment to core principles, consensus, and common action, mutual respect, inclusiveness, transparency, accountability, legitimacy, and responsiveness. These are fundamental to the way in which the modern Commonwealth convenes for a sustainable future, and we date its establishment from the London Declaration in 1949. This rose from the decision of India to become a republic, and its desire to remain within the Commonwealth offered the opportunity for an innovative development and progress of our family of nations. So India has always been at the core of the Commonwealth. It opened up fresh opportunities for mainstreaming our ties of inheritance and history, and building together for the future with respect and understanding based on shared values and a spirit of hope and goodwill. Prime Minister Nehru famously declared that the Commonwealth brings a touch of healing. Mutual support, offered in the spirit of goodwill with respect and understanding, has continued to foster the building of resilience and has encouraged cooperation in the face of many crises and challenges. And that is why the theme chosen for the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting next April is towards a common future. There will be a special focus on how that common future can be made more sustainable, fairer, more secure, and more prosperous for all. One such challenge facing us now, and with increasing urgency, is the threat of climate change. It affects us all and threatens our collective future and our collective well-being. Many of our smaller and our more vulnerable member countries have recently been disrupted and in some cases devastated by extreme weather events and other catastrophes. And the adverse impact of climate change is affecting every region of the Commonwealth. I recently witnessed the devastating trail of ruin left by Hurricanes Irma and Maria in parts of the Caribbean. Barbuda had to be vacated. Dominica, country of my birth, 200% of the GDP washed away and nowhere to run to. There have been landslides in Africa and floods right across Asia. and such weather patterns are complex. And while we may see increased incidents of flooding in September, there may be negative impacts on water security. And as things become more unpredictable, cross-regional sustainable land and water management practices aligned with improved approaches to water quality and consumption will become ever more critical to the successful coordination of climate resilient action. And the associated impacts of extreme weather, particularly on food security because of reduced crop production yields, and to human health through risks such as malaria, are also of grave concern. And demographic growth is, of course, another serious dimension for climate change challenge, and the destructive impact of climate change on the delicate balance of life on this planet poses an existential threat to many of our communities, and in some cases, entire countries. And that is why tackling climate change is a priority for collective action by all of our 52 member states. And although the shock from recent extreme weather is fresh and immediate, this, unfortunately, is not a new or an unexpected crisis. The Commonwealth has always been at the vanguard of action on climate change, and thus the understanding of the extent of the impending threat first dawned long ago. And we continue to raise awareness and working with the international community on practical ways towards mitigation and adaptation. And resilience is a strength we seek to build in the Commonwealth as a defence against the vulnerabilities resulting from geographic, economic, social, political, or human factors. And resilience can be built using the regenerative model of development. And we've spent the last 18 months carefully working in consultation with our member states and with a broad range and array of scientists from many disciplines and other specialists, because we want to know how we can do better and do better together. And we've convened 3 meetings specifically on regenerative development in Marlborough House to listen and to consider the needs of our citizens and to devise an innovative and synthesized approach building on our Commonwealth advantage in innovative ways to respond to those needs. And our determination has been to find holistic solutions and to work together towards a common future based on the Commonwealth Charter and the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development, which by definition leaves no one behind. And as our understanding has evolved, the regenerative model for building resilience to climate change has emerged, including specific expressions of collective commitment, such as the Commonwealth Blue Charter. Ecosystems form critical building blocks which assist us in building resilience together. Coral reefs, so vulnerable to increased storms, perform essential flood protection. The ecological protection of land and river catchments help us to ensure water security and guard against land degradation and drought. From this recognition grows the concept of regenerative development, which encompasses our belief that climate adaptation and resilience must be bottom-up, placing people and ecosystem service and function at its very core. And the aim is for development without depletion, with reciprocity between human needs and the balance of our natural environment. And it's consistent with our Commonwealth Charter principles, which include environmental protection, preservation and conservation of the natural ecosystems, and social equity and economic progress as factors in sustainable development. And one of the challenges we've had is that we have tended historically to look at these issues as hermetically sealed, not interconnected, not interdependent, but separate. And our greater understanding is that they're not. They're intertwined. And that's how we have to respond to the complexity. And the Charter calls for adaptation and mitigation actions and the generation and adoption of clean technology and waste management strategies, all of which are elements of regenerative development. And by working to conserve the biological biodiversity and reverse land degradation, regenerative development creates sustainable investment opportunities right across the Commonwealth. And these are likely to play an increasingly important part in supporting Commonwealth countries towards meeting commitments under the Paris Agreement and towards achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. And we need to be acutely aware of the complexity of the climate change challenge, which may, at times, I know, seem overwhelming. Being smart, being agile, and continually responding to change through processes of renewal and adaptation have for millennia been vital to successful evolution and survival. And as humans, alongside the destructive possibilities of our progress and development, we have the ability of being able to assess and plan for the common good and a better future, particularly if we choose to do that together. And India is leading the way with commitment and innovation that is smart and transformative for the way in which we live, learn, and work together. A smarter future is more than simply a technologically advanced future. Our Commonwealth understanding and approach sees respect for the dignity of all individuals and communities as being vital to sustainable progress. And we see social inclusion and economic inclusion as being inextricably intertwined and interlinked. Each is vital in building resilience and reducing vulnerability. And this call for fairness and the upholding of human rights under the rule of law with impartial access to justice. And this is reflected in the excellent Smart Cities mission of the Government of India. And by providing for the aspirations and the needs of citizens, it aims to develop the entire urban ecosystem, which is represented by the 4 pillars of comprehensive development: institutional, physical, social, and economic infrastructure. Such smart approaches to social inclusion encompasses intergenerational justice, with due attention paid to the needs, aspirations, and dignity of all demographics, but particularly youth, through education and meaningful employment opportunities. And that's so important to us when, as you've heard, 60% of the Commonwealth is below the age of 30. And in certain countries, like Uganda, 78% are below the age of 30 and 59% below the age of 18. So solutions have not only to be smart, but they have to be sustainable. And they are only smart if they are sustainable. And that's why our Commonwealth focus is on building resilience and reducing vulnerability. And smart approaches to building sustainability and vulnerability require continuing re-evaluation and reform of institutions and systems so that governance and public service are accountable, responsive, and fit for purpose, hastening rather than delaying progress. So cross-fertilization of ideas and experience is a characteristic of how the cooperative approach in the Commonwealth is used to accelerate positive change. And working together inclusively as the Commonwealth, we are able to draw on deep wells of knowledge, experience, and goodwill. And our multiple levels of connection and engagement are distinctive features and strengths of Commonwealth cooperation and convening power. And these are intergovernmental and regional, and some formal, but others more informal. And their informality quite often gives them their dynamism and their spice. And these are intergovernmental measures which work. And they're also links and networks for exchange and support at institutional, professional, and individual levels. And they're derived from and add to the broad and inclusive nature of Commonwealth kinship and affinity, rooted in long-established relationships and continually nurturing new expressions of cooperation and partnerships. I went to one country, and I think they described it brilliantly. They said the Commonwealth is your bad weather friend. It's always there in stormy times. And indeed, we work together, not as foreigners, but as family, with respect and with understanding. And we are aided in this by our common language, the common law, similar parliamentary and other institutions, as well as our cultural ties. And we draw on Commonwealth advantage, accelerate adoption of new systems, and the similarities of our systems of law, justice, governance, administration, and education mean that it is very likely that what has worked in one of our member states or jurisdictions will work elsewhere, or that an adaptation adopted in one region can be applied swiftly and beneficially in another. It's a bit like a plug and play. And in many areas of activity, these factors combine to create what we call the Commonwealth advantage. This advantage draws on the ease and simplicity with which we are able to work together, and is of immense importance as to how the Commonwealth collectively responds to the needs of member states and to the needs of our citizens and their ambitions and their aspirations. And this common language isn't just linguistic, it's also nuanced understanding, because in the Commonwealth members understand understatement. So you can say, that is a really good idea. And everyone knows you've just said it's the worst idea I've ever heard, without a translator. And that matters when we are trying to come up with smart solutions, because fundamental to our approach and attitude is a resolute commitment to working together through consensus and towards concord. And this enables respect and understanding to take root and really flourish, so that disagreement and division are overshadowed and can be overcome. And to help our member countries derive even greater benefits from the distinctive ease with which we work together in the Commonwealth, we are establishing an innovation hub at the Commonwealth Secretariat. And it's aimed at fostering and practicing innovation to tackle our collective issues in a much smarter manner. And as a repository of knowledge and expertise on successful innovation, it will collate and disseminate examples of what has worked so that they can be applied elsewhere in the Commonwealth. But we're also doing something a little unusual, because we're collecting what has not worked. Because if one of our members has spent $1 doing something, we don't want anyone else to spend the same dollar. And sharing our mistakes can be one of the most powerful things we can do for each other, because many of those mistakes are common and sensible and are the stepping stone to success. So sharing them is as important as those things which have really gone well. And this sits alongside the newly created Commonwealth Office of Civil and Criminal Justice Reform, which draws together templates for legislation, best practice across the broad range of disciplines and fields of activity. It also encompasses gender balance, access to justice, procurement, and many other areas relating to public and corporate conduct. Inclusive and sustainable development is achieved by offering equitable opportunities to everyone to participate and by drawing on the talents and contributions of all. And some of our smaller states have come up with some seriously smart, cheap solutions to some pretty complex problems. And our Commonwealth Charter states that we are implacably opposed to all forms of discrimination, whether rooted in gender, race, colour, creed, political belief, or other grounds. And we cannot think of progress towards achieving the broader goals of the 2030 Agenda for Sustainable Development without thinking about overcoming prejudice and discrimination of any kind, or working for gender equality and including people of all ages. And gender equality and empowerment of women and girls through education and social and economic inclusion are also vital factors in being responsive to the ambitions and aspirations of all our citizens. And there is a strong correlation between increasing the capacity of women to engage in economic enterprise and wider empowerment of women for leadership that will lead to achieving gender equality and sustainable development. And therefore, through Commonwealth programs and technical assistance, we are working to increase the participation of women in corporate decision-making at all levels. And we know that the power of parity report in the McKinsey Institute that between $12 and $28 trillion could be added to the global economy if women played an equal role. And that 50-50 balance is important, and parity leads to greatest progress. And our goal, through the empowerment of people and institutions in the Commonwealth, is to achieve 50-50 by 2030. And progress will be severely retarded unless we make the elimination of violence against women a priority. And it really is sobering to consider that every day and every night, millions of girls and women around our world face consistent threats in their homes, where they should be the most protected and the most secure. So respect for dignity of each individual, regardless of gender or any other identity, is the base on which we build peace in our homes. The economic and social costs of violence against women still vastly outweighs the cost of that perpetrated against men. A peaceful life, free from violence, is a fundamental human right. Yet simply because of gender, women and girls are disproportionately subjected to violence, and it crosses boundaries and can affect anyone, regardless of place or position, even in what ought to be a safe haven, the home. Violence and intimidation against women can be all-pervasive. And only the cold, hard figures will drive home the impact of this scourge. And research indicates that the cost of violence against women could amount to around 2% of the global gross domestic product. That's equivalent to 1.5 trillion US dollars, roughly the size of the economy of Canada. And furthermore, their findings reveal that domestic and intimate partner violence causes more deaths and entails much higher economic costs globally than homicide or war. I had the great privilege of being responsible for this agenda when I was the Minister of Criminal Justice in the UK and the Attorney General. And the cost of domestic violence to the United Kingdom in 2003-2004 was £23 billion. And that economic cost was real. By the time I left government in 2010, we had reduced the cost of domestic violence by 7.1 billion a year, and we'd reduced domestic violence by 64%. It's one of my aspirations that we together should do something similar right across our Commonwealth, because I believe we can if we choose. And it'll take all of us, men, women, girls, and boys, working together with one mind. And according to a UN women study in India, a woman loses an average of 5 paid work days for each incident of intimate violence, while in Uganda, about 9% of violent incidents forced women to lose time from paid work, amounting to approximately 11 days a year. And significant strides have been made in the struggle to end violence against women in some of our member countries. And there is much we can learn from each other, particularly by sharing experience of what has or has not worked. But we still have a long way to go before the vision of eliminating the scourge of violence against women and girls within the Commonwealth becomes a reality. Inclusive and balance are powerful factors in building resilience and reducing vulnerability. And they are key to achieving a common future that is more sustainable, fairer, more secure, and more prosperous. When heads of government appointed me to be Secretary General, I said I wanted to put the wealth back into Commonwealth and the common back into wealth. In saying that, I was simply articulating the essence of what motivates us all as a Commonwealth family, and what has for more than 60 years guided us along shared pathways towards good governance, sustainable growth, and inclusive social and economic development. The wealth is more than money. It demands real investment in the social capital of each of our member states. And I know a number of you would have looked at the World Bank data that came out about a month ago, which thankfully charted the fact that we had improved growth. It was now 3.7 as opposed to the 2% growth that we'd had the year before. But when they interrogated that 3.7, the countries who are doing best and better were those who were investing in their human capital. And the 2015 Commonwealth Trade Review, an excellent study full of fascinating data, showed that there is a measurable advantage in intra-Commonwealth trade. And the research and analysis shows that when both bilateral partners are Commonwealth members, they tend to trade 20% more and generate 10% more foreign direct investment inflows than would otherwise be the case. And this potent Commonwealth effect implies bilateral trade costs between Commonwealth partners are on average 19% lower compared with those of other country pairs. So it is good business sense to make the most of this unique asset for the greater good of all our citizens. Trade among Commonwealth countries has risen from 200 billion in the year 2000 to more than 600 billion today. By 2020, we estimate it will be worth $1 trillion. So the economic links between our nations are growing. Some would say exponentially. And this offers huge opportunity over the coming years to make even more of our Commonwealth trade advantage and to extend it from 19% to perhaps 30% or beyond. To do so, we will need to enhance and share best commercial and regulatory practice within our similar statutory frameworks so that we make it even easier and better for Commonwealth members to trade one with the other. This, together with many other aspects of Commonwealth connection and collective action to accelerate social advantages and advances towards increased youth inclusion and gender balance, is what we mean when we refer to being smart and to mobilizing as the Commonwealth in ways that are smart for all our communities and all our nations. We are especially equipped thanks to the endowments and inheritances of our past and the potency and potential for our individual and combined assets to accelerate and add to the global progress and prosperity in ways that are smart, sustainable, and socially inclusive. These are more than enticing prospects. Through determination and collective Commonwealth commitment, we are making them a reality. And in these troubled and troubling times, it is particularly opportune for each and every one of us to lay claim to our shared Commonwealth advantage and to connect and build in new ways towards a common future that is more sustainable, fairer, and more secure and more prosperous. We have an opportunity to choose to work together. We have an opportunity to share knowledge, experience, expertise, and our woes. And together, we have an opportunity, if we choose, to deliver on the Sustainable Development Goals. I think it was Gandhi who said, we have to be the change we want to see in the world. I believe that the Commonwealth working together can be that change, not just for the 52 member states who are currently members of the Commonwealth, but we can be a pathway for others. No one else represents a third of the world in the way that we do. It is the most extraordinary position that history has given us, because we literally are a pilot for what the world could do if it chose, joined by this special language, special history. And I'm very proud that all of us are giving it a go. Thank you very much.
We'll take some comments and questions from all of you. Introduce yourself when you pose a question and a remark. I can see some regulars with their hands up, but let me try to go to the non-regulars first. Vivan, you want to come in the back? I think we have time. We'll come to all of you. But let me bring in some new voices. Again, so can I have the mic with Vivan, please? Yes, I will do the moderation this afternoon. Thank you.
Ma'am, thank you for your remarks today, and I was compelled by many things that you said, particularly towards the end around areas of the economy, because I work as a consultant on economic issues in Delhi. And your point on regulators and sharing best practices, I'm just picking up on keywords here, and you mentioned pilots as well. Do you see merit, given that we are 50-odd countries of different sizes, but we face a common challenge of technological change? And we have been solving for this challenge through different means, and I think regulators are often at the cusp of this challenge because, you know, including pillars of your charter, areas like good governance, rule of law, separation of powers, these are all areas of your charter, and the regulators also sit at the intersection of those areas, and they're at the cusp of this technological challenge. Do you see merit in piloting an informal dialogue between Commonwealth regulators to discuss these areas, share both successes and failures?
So let me add to that, ma'am. Can we also think about creating a Commonwealth digital policy forum or network, multi-stakeholder in nature, where we could discuss some of these key changes that are already on the way?
I think there are real possibilities. One of the reasons I created the Office of Civil and Criminal Justice Reform is if we take the regulatory arrangement in the civil justice system. I had spoken to a number of Chief Justices, Ministers of Justice and regulators, all of whom were facing the same problem, all of whom were complaining that the Treasury didn't give them enough money to do it. All of them were looking at a common way forward. And it seemed to me that it'd make much better sense for us to work together as opposed to working separately. So this is already starting to happen because many of the challenges that we now face are global. And the advantage that we have in the common law is that because we have been involved, all of our countries, save two, have had a common law practice in our countries, it means we have the same baseline. So to migrate to a similar new baseline is easier, and what will be really effective is if we can deliver interoperability. So what we're trying to do in the Office of Civil and Criminal Justice Reform is both in the civil and criminal areas to look at what joins us, to look at the common issues, and then see how we can work together. And doing it digitally makes imminent and real sense because this is the new paradigm for the 22nd century. So we're working on it. Please, those of you who haven't looked at the Commonwealth website and our Office of Civil and Criminal Justice Reform, do that. But we are reaching out to all our partners, and this is one of the issues we'll be looking at when we come to look at the Innovation Hub. What I hope we might be able to do is, through consulting our countries, identify key areas where there is agreement that we need to go forward together, and then see whether we can't pilot some of these new issues in a way that makes sense. And we're doing that on our climate change legislation. We've created frameworks. So this is a real smart way of us working together as a Commonwealth.
Tino. So I'll come to you. Please don't sit with the mic. Let the mic be with the usher. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Constantino Xavier from Carnegie India, New Delhi. Ma'am, great speech where you really bridged, I think, the original values and principles of this organization to, I think, current challenges and, more importantly, the future vision. I think you've really clearly set out for where this organization should head to. My question is more if you could help us identify what specific areas you'd see India capable of playing a more driving role, since this is, after all, despite, I mean, you're very active and activist secretariat and intergovernmental organization. So what are the Indian government's dimension, but also non-governmental stakeholders, maybe more importantly, what role do you see for our largest member state?
Well, I'm really thrilled by what India's now doing and the commitment and the opportunity to move to the front of leadership in relation to a number of the issues, not least what India's doing in relation to smart cities. I spoke a lot about this opportunity to create a regenerative approach to development. India's already mapping out these new, smarter cities which will be fit for the 22nd century. But if you look at the real innovative approaches that have been taken as to how you re-enfranchise the poor. The fact that they made available the bank accounts with zero balance, which has been, I understand, taken advantage of. 78% of the people who've taken advantage of those accounts have been women, and they're young people and young entrepreneurs. I think it's the innovation that is so exciting. Talking to our justice colleagues at the Law Ministers' Conference, there were so many new, creative, smart approaches which are cheap. Everyone else is thinking, how do we do this? So there's climate change, which I know is being looked at. There are real opportunities in relation to small states, and India has been very, very open and collegiate with small, vulnerable states. And that's something which has been incredibly important. The other thing that I would emphasize is the fact that India launched the Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Network in May of this year, was amazingly well received. I would like to see a hub here with spokes in other areas. I think there are so many areas where I know India's aspirations dovetail with the new agenda that I've just set out. And so I would be applauding if all or any of those issues were taken up. But youth and women, I am really thrilled that this is being looked at as a driver for development, particularly women, because we have not utilized half of our population in the way that we really should.
The gentleman here, please.
Thank you. Thank you, ma'am. I'm Trinanjan Radhakrishnan from the Commonwealth Human Rights Initiative. Amongst the many commonalities that you have rightly pointed out, perhaps one that got missed out is that that the Commonwealth member states are also perhaps the highest ranking violators of human rights and democratic values. Since it's indeed difficult to rein in member states, what are your thoughts of including more civil society participation in the Commonwealth Secretariat to rein in and act as a counterbalance and watchdog to member states? Now the UK will be the next chair for the next 2 years. Perhaps UK could set an example, and the Commonwealth could be the implementers of such a system where there's more civil society, more accountability, and more SDG 16 values. Thank you.
I think he is being unnecessarily kind to the Commonwealth, but all of us are violators of human rights. 200 of them who signed the UN document, the 3 documents. So how do you bring in a multi-stakeholder dimension that we were discussing, communities, into the Commonwealth process?
Well, I think the thing we have to set out is that the Commonwealth Secretariat is one organization, but we have 80 Commonwealth accredited organizations, all of which work together as a family. You will notice that we have concentrated trenchantly on the human rights dimension. We have been working at every level, particularly in relation to helping those states who lack capacity. We've been working on the creating legal instruments, helping to create model laws, frameworks, and indeed supporting our member states through the Small States Office in Geneva to address those issues. And India has been very supportive of our Small States Office, as have a number of the other countries. And what I would like to do is to have advisors, technical advisors, able to be at least one, to be in the Small States Office so that that technical assistance can be given. We work with our member states respectfully, but trenchantly. And what I have heard from so many is they say, 1, we would like to change. 2, it's very difficult. 3, we don't always have the the technical assistance, we don't always have the lawyers, we don't always have the framework agreements, we don't always have the framework legislation. And that's why I have emphasized that we need to work towards providing those tools, providing those toolkits, and working alongside our member states respectfully, but helping them to do those things that they would most like to do. And if you look at what we've managed to achieve in the last few years, I hope you will find that we've made significant progress. So, for example, if you look at the constitutional changes that have happened, they have had real consequences for other countries who are even now looking at how they will need to change their constitutions. So I think the thing that Samir and Rapendra said earlier is really important, that we do this together, we do it consultatively, but we don't go away. We really are your bad weather friend. And we tell you things you don't want to hear, but you need to know.
And I know it's premature for you to answer this, but I think something for us to consider going forward, if we really want to make this more popular amongst the youth that we are seeking to engage with, is probably creating new forums where many more new voices can participate in many of the Commonwealth affairs.
Yeah. Well, I should tell you that we have created not only the Commonwealth Youth Council, but we have 9 youth networks that they deal with human rights, climate change, entrepreneurship, women, everything. And the dynamism that's coming out of that youth is really very exciting. At the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting, at the summit, the Commonwealth CHOGM, Commonwealth Heads of Government, we will going to have 4 forums. And there's the civil society forum. So this isn't just one-dimensional. There are many opportunities for engagement in the business forum, in the women's forum, in the youth forum, and the civil society forum. And the Commonwealth Foundation, the Royal Commonwealth Society, the Commonwealth of Learning, all of us are working together. And that's what I was talking about earlier. We tend to see ourselves as hermetically sealed in one single entity. Yet what we are trying to do is to create a network of bodies which are going to be inclusive but people-centered. And this is a change in the way we're delivering it, but it's a change which I think needs to happen if we are to be relevant to the 21st century.
Can I request John to pose his question? I think we have one more after John, and I would like to actually... okay, John, go ahead.
John Elliott, Asia Sentinel and Riding the Elephant blog. Could you both maybe comment specifically on the proposals coming out from London about India playing a much more leading role alongside the UK in developing the Commonwealth to revitalise the Commonwealth? This, I think, has been discussed here with the government by Prince Charles, Lord Ahmed and Tim Hitchens. Could I ask you, Baroness Scotland, what you think of the proposals of India playing a leading role alongside the UK? And could I ask Mr. Tandon, after his very pro-Commonwealth contribution, how far the talks have got between the Indian government and Britain about what could be done? And
I'm excited to listen to the answers. Go ahead.
Well, I think it's very important to remember that of the 2.4 billion Commonwealth citizens, India is 55%. So India is already playing a very significant role because it's more than half the Commonwealth citizens. I am, as Secretary General, the person responsible for trying to encourage all 52 countries to play a leading role and to participate fully in this family. And you will hear me only applaud any suggestion that any country is willing to play a leading role. And when the biggest country in terms of numbers appears to be doing that, I'll probably do cartwheels down the middle of the floor.
Mr. Tandon, would you like to respond? This wasn't planned, but since it's been directed to you.
Well, okay, so firstly, the Commonwealth is 52 members. So it's not just Britain, it is not just India, it is 52 countries. The United Kingdom is going to be the chair in office for the next 2 years, post April 2018. So the activities of the Commonwealth will be husbanded or will be shepherded by the chair in office. We have looked at the Commonwealth, and as I told you in my introductory remarks, we do plan to step up our engagement because we see the London Summit as an important event, London Chogam, sorry about the summit, London Chogam as an important stepping stone or a launch pad for a revitalization of this multilateral platform, which actually delivers a lot of utility to a lot of countries with whom we have interest. So this would describe our approach at this moment. And insofar as discussions with the chair in office are concerned, like other countries, we too attend the preparatory meetings for this. We, like other countries, have indicated the things we want the heads of government to mandate the Secretariat, the activities that they should undertake, because they reflect, they speak to the times, they reflect the interests of the majority of, or what we perceive as reflecting the interests of the majority in the Commonwealth. And these discussions are ongoing. One of the first meetings has just concluded, and I think that we are going to get a notice for some more preparatory meetings.
Thank you. I'll take the last question from Jhumar Mehta, a young scholar. I want a young lady's voice in this afternoon conversation as well. Jhumar, the mic will come to you. And this is the final question.
Good morning, ma'am. Good afternoon, actually. So my question is, since gender is a big aspect to your agenda, I wanted to ask, what are the specific areas within gender which you would want to look at? Secondly, is there a certain geographical region within the Commonwealth, considering the Commonwealth is a big region within itself, that you would want to stress upon in comparison to the others? And thirdly, since we were talking about the digital age, so are we looking at innovation and the digital media, how the women are underrepresented in terms of the technology that we're bringing about and in terms of the workforce as well? So are we looking at that as well within the Commonwealth?
I think it's right to say we're looking at all of those things. Why? Because women are 50% of the world's population. And some people say, actually, we're not a minority, we might be 51%, which would mean that we are the majority. And it's really important for us to look at women's empowerment, the opportunity to participate in public life, the opportunity to engage in business and entrepreneurship, the opportunity in relation to the disparity there is in health and well-being. So it's all of it. It's making sure that when we talk about equality, we talk about all of us. Men, women, boys, girls, old, those of us who are in our third age, or feels that way, and those of us who are very young. So it is making sure that the gender issue is woven into all of those, because we know that it makes economic sense, it makes social sense, it enhances the peaceful nature of our communities, and it makes us whole. I remember my mother saying to me, I come from a very small family. I'm one of my mother and father's 12 only children. I'm their 10th only child. And there were 5 girls and 7 boys. And my father used to tell me that there is nothing that his girls couldn't do that his boys did. And when my mother wasn't listening, he'd say, only better. And then my mother would say to me, I don't know why we allow men to run the world. We don't let them do anything else on their own. They need our help. So 50% men, 50% women. I think God got it right. What we do together tends to make better sense than what we try to do on our own.
With your family size, you should be given an Indian citizenship. We like small families as well. The final word this afternoon from the High Commission, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Hello, I'm David Pollard, the High Commissioner from Guyana. And I bring regards from Hamley Case, who I believe you know is the High Commissioner, Guyanese High Commissioner in London. Though I'm neither female nor young, you may be interested to know my question is also about gender. I was very impressed by the figures you quoted for the improvements that had been achieved in England under your stewardship in terms of domestic violence. And it has always struck me that often things of that kind of social nature that can be achieved in the established countries are sometimes even more effective in developing countries. So I was wondering, to what extent does the Commonwealth keep track of its various gender balance initiatives in some of the bigger but less developed countries, and if there is evidence there that similarly spectacular gains can be made in relatively short order? Thank you.
Well, the first thing I need to say is that unfortunately domestic violence is no respecter of persons, people, regions or areas, so that the difference that was made in the UK was because we introduced a more integrated, holistic approach to dealing with the problem. And the depressing thing is, we managed to reduce it so that it had been 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men. We reduced it to 1 in 6 women to 1 in 10 men. But frankly, when we stopped implementing the holistic approach, I understand the figures are back to 1 in 4 women and 1 in 6 men. And it affected between 750,000 and 950,000 children. So where the countries where we have implemented a multidisciplinary approach, irrespective of whether they're rich or poor countries, the figures go down. The countries where we have continued to have a silo-based approach, it hasn't worked. So I think that gives me great hope, because the DNA of domestic violence is the same everywhere. So if we can come up with something, an antidote, an approach which works in one country, the joy that I think we will find is it will work in all of our countries. It's one of the reasons why I want us to share what works and to acknowledge what just does not work and stop bashing our heads against the wall. And so these sorts of things, I hope, will go into our innovation hub, that people will be able to, if they're looking at some new development, to say who else in the Commonwealth may already have done this, and we'll be able to help each other. And that's what partnership, collegiality will look like. And my dream would be for us to reduce domestic violence in all of our 52 countries without exception. And I'd love that if we could do it together. And I think if we choose, we can, but we have to choose. And I sort of say, I'm choosing. I hope all of you will too.
Thank you very much, ma'am. This now brings us to the end of the interaction with the audience, and it's now my privilege to propose a vote of thanks. It's impossible to capture the breadth of your oration. In a sense, you covered the key global challenges, human challenges, social challenges, and individual challenges that confront all of us. The two international arrangements that you mentioned, the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, must clearly be something at the forefront of any agenda that we carve out for ourselves. As a multilateral forum, we must try and find ways that this particular platform is able to give voice to those who may not be heard in the larger assemblies that we gather in international arenas. And in that sense, your emphasis on inclusion, on equity, on gender parity, and on rule of law clearly begins to define what 2018 might produce as an outcome when we meet in London next year. I particularly like the word choose, and I think this is the time as the world goes through its midlife crisis, as someone mentioned. We need to make the right choices, and I think a group of 52 countries which span the economic strata, the linguistic strata, the color, the race, the ethnic strata, when we choose, it has compelling weight. The choice we make has great equity, has great persuasion, has the moral authority to influence others around us, and I think it must be seen as that, not only as a utility and as a instrument that enables our own individual priorities, but also as a strategic instrument for creating a more normative a world which has ethics in its normative order, and I think that's extremely important.